All right, so now that our landing page layout is set up, we want to actually get the functionality working for this join waiting list. And the goal here is really to collect users' emails. And the way we're going to do this is actually to create their account for them. So since we've been setting our app up with Firebase, we're really just going, when they enter their email, we're going to actually create them a user account for our app with an email. And really all that's going to mean is that in Firebase authentication, which we've already set up in previous videos, you see I have my test users here, but once they enter their email address on this line here and hit join waiting list, we want that to create a new user here with email. So it'd be similar to this email here. And that way we'll be able to, once the app is live, we'll be able to send them an email that basically says, you know, your account has already been reserved. You can reset your password here, and then they'll already have their account. So back in our command line here, we're going to install Firebase tools, and this is another npm package. So this will allow us to interact with Firebase from our command line. Okay, once that's done, then we're going to actually install Firebase as the npm package into our Vue app. So do make sure you're in the directory of the Vue app that we've been working in. And this will install that new Firebase package. So to confirm that that's been installed, if you go into your code, you can see your packages .json file has been updated. I recently just checked this into Git, so now I see the differences in the color of the file. So yeah, but you can see it's there in your dependencies. These files you shouldn't edit manually. Instead, you should just do it through npm in the command line. So now that that's there, we can use Firebase commands in the command line. And the first one we'll do is Firebase login. And you're going to want to log into, I'm already logged in, so you're going to want to log into the account that you use to for Firebase. So the account that you're using to log into see this view. Now you can use, since we're in this folder, again for our project, we can do Firebase init. All right, so here you can go through and choose what you are going to want. Right now, we can just select hosting. We are going to use functions as well later, so select that. We're not going to use Firestore or the database, and neither, really just hosting and functions is what you're going to want to select. So use the spacebar to select those and then hit enter. And then it's going to ask you if you want to use an existing project or create a new project. Do use an existing project, so that hit enter there. Then it'll list your Firebase projects with that you have under this Firebase account that you're logged in with. The one that I've been using is the travel budget one, so we'll go with that. Then it's asking you if you want to use JavaScript or TypeScript. We'll go with JavaScript. And then you could hit no to ESLint. Hit yes to installing the npm dependencies. You'll notice these 3 new files will have been created within your project directory. The functions one, which we're actually not going to touch right now, we can use that later. Then it's going to ask you what you want to use for your public directory, and you can just keep it with public. Configure as a single page app. You can hit yes to this because in this example we will be doing a single page app. But the main thing here is that it now created these configuration files for us. So if you go in, you can see we have our Firebase configuration file that has our Firebase, you know, this is the actual name of our Firebase project right here. And then this JSON object as well is kind of going to be used more for when we're deploying the app and hosting it. But either way, that just make sure that this is set correct, which it should be if you just went through all of that correctly. All right, so the app is not quite fully set up yet. We still need to add our credentials into the project. In the src folder here, we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it Firebase. And now within this folder, we can create a new file, and we're going to call this credentials.js. And this is what that file is going to need to contain. So this file here, all this information, you can find in your Firebase app. So if you go to your project overview, you're going to want to add a new app here and choose the web version of the app. And this we can just call, you can call it anything you want. Landing page is what I'll go with. And we're going to also set up the Firebase hosting for this. So register the app there. These scripts that it's telling you to copy, you're actually not going to need to do that because of the way we're configuring it with Vue. It will do that for us. You can see this is something we already did, and then we actually already did this stuff as well. So we can continue to the console. We didn't do the deploy part yet. If you go to your apps here now and you go to the app that you just created, you can go to the settings of it, and right down here, if you click on config, you're going to get the config information that you need. So I have this all blurred out right now, but you're going to copy all this information to your app and replace it in the location that I was just showing you. So I'm going to leave this blank, and I'm going to off camera fill this in myself. And if you are pulling this down from GitHub, you're going to need to fill this in yourself as well. All right, so I recreated the file. My credentials file .js right here is set with my actual credentials, and I've added that to my git ignore. So that's not going to be checked into GitHub. If you are using GitHub, which I recommend you do, you should do the same thing. I created another version of this file with all blank values. So basically, because this credentials file won't be in GitHub, so if I ever need to use this again, or even if you're pulling this from GitHub, you'll at least see what the example needs to look like. So now that our credentials are set, we can go into the main.js file. We're going to import using the Firestore plugin from Vuefire. And actually, before we do that, we need to install that package in Vuefire, which is called Vuefire. Which allows Vue to talk to Firebase. So this is also an npm package, and it's just called Vuefire. All right, and now that that's been installed, we can go in here, and we'll do this before Bootstrap. We're going to call import, and it's Firestore plugin, Firestore plugin from Vuefire. Down here, we actually need to tell Vue to use that Firestore plugin. All right, so now the app is essentially configured for Firebase. So we can now have it do some stuff. We're going to create a new file over here as well, and we can call this app.js. So this app.js file is actually what we're going to use to create that instance of Firebase within our app. So everything we've done so far has configured it to be usable in the app. This is going to actually have it be used. So it's pretty simple. It's going to be these 3 lines of code. So we're importing Firebase, and we're importing that credentials file that we created right here. And then we're creating this app constant that is going to be an instance of Firebase. So you'll notice we're going to be using this app constant in the next files that we create. Speaking of the next files, let's create another new file. This one's going to be the auth. So this one is going to create the instance of our Firebase auth. I'll paste this in here as well. So this is going to be using that app constant that we just created over here. So we're going to get, basically we're getting our Firebase instance, and we're also going to be importing this new auth package here. And now we can export this this constant auth, and that's just going to be an instance of from the instance of Firebase. We're going to be calling an instance of auth. So this keeps it so that everything is a little bit separate, but really what we're doing is just creating these essentially global variables, because we can then use this auth file here and this auth constant throughout our app, and we'll have that instance of auth that way. So similar to how we're doing this with auth, if you were going to use this for Firestore and actually connect to your database and do that, you would do a very similar thing, except you would just call Firestore here instead of auth, and obviously import that package. But that's not really going to be what we're covering in this video. So moving on, now Firebase is configured, so we can use this auth constant on our, and make sure we save these files. We use that auth constant on our, let me close out all of these and clean it up a little bit. Back on our home page view. So back on our home page view, if we go down to the JavaScript area of it, which is within our script tags, the first thing we're going to do is import that auth constant that we just created. So we're going to import here, and it's going to be auth. And the reason we can import this is because we're exporting it here. So since we're exporting it as a constant, we can import it in other areas of the app later, which is exactly what we're doing here. So we import auth, and we're going to tell where we're importing that from. So it's going to be from that file, which is, and this at here is basically saying from the root path of the source, and then within that we have that folder called Firebase, and then within that it's in our auth folder, auth.js, not folder, file, sorry. So now that we have auth import into our home page component, we can actually use that to actually get this form set up to use Firebase Auth and authenticate a user. All right, so this email field and this button are the only two real components that we're going to need for the auth to work properly. So we are going to need to bind these to data elements in our JavaScript of the Vue app. So similar to how we have the title set like this, we're going to do the same thing for the email. And we're going to set that blank to begin with. We're going to do another one for a message, which is really going to be like an error message. And that one we're also going to set to be blank. With the email one now, we need to bind this to the form input field. So if we go back up to our form here, and you find where we have the email, you'll see here's our email input right here. So there's a few things we need to do with this. The ID is good. We're going to, before the ID, we're actually going to use a Vue model. So this is how we actually bind that element. You use v model, and we'll set that equal to email. Now this email here is the email that we just set down here. So it's just slightly confusing because I guess we're naming these variables all the same, but that is that variable. So if you name it differently down there, you want to bind it differently here. This type is going to be email. Now this type email here is just HTML. We could have had this before, but we didn't. But that's just HTML. Having this type email is going to help with browser support, in that the browser will know that this is expecting an email address, and Chrome and Safari and Firefox, all these modern browsers have functionality built in where if it knows it's an email field, it can auto-populate it, for instance, and it'll also do a little bit of verification for you. We'll set up some verification ourselves, but it's nice to keep these types set to what you actually are using them for. Another example for this is if you're using it on your iPhone, the keyboard will change slightly, so it'll have the @ symbol and all that kind of stuff. So that all happens because of this type being email. Anyway, though, we're also going to add another div down here, and we'll do this real quick right now for that message. So this is just going to be, we're going to give it a margin top of 4. So there's a little bit of space, and then we're just gonna have a paragraph here. We'll give this the class of no margin, actually. So margin 0. And then in here is where we're just going to display that message. So since the message is nothing, this should look the same right now. But if you were to go in and put something here and save it, you'll see that we get that message there. So that's where we'll put an error, or if they sign in, or if they sign up correctly, we'll also display a message that says, we got your email. That's all to come. So clear that back out. All right, so now our input field is bound to a email variable in JavaScript, and now we want to basically bind this button to a function. So once the email is filled out and the button is clicked, we want a function to be triggered. So since the button is of type submit and it's on a form, the way you do that is actually with a submit you actually bind the whole form's submit action to a function. So that'll look like this. Submit, and then you could call prevent and have that equal a function that you want to call. So this was spelled wrong. We're going to call that function add email. And then we're going to pass a parameter to that function, and that will be the email. And the email that we're passing to it is going to be this email variable right here. And since it's part of the form, it will be looking in the form for a bound variable, and it'll use that email right there. So this is good. We need to create this function now. So the form part is done. Back in the JavaScript part down here, we're going to create a new section, which is methods. And this is all how Vue is set up. So you have within this default, you have your data, you can have methods. There's other things you can have as well, but these are the only two we're going to be using right now. So within this, we're going to create that function, which is going to be add email. And this is going to be an asynchronous function because it is going to be making a call to Firebase. So define async in the beginning. And if you've been following along with the Flutter stuff, this is all the same concepts of asynchronous functions and submitting stuff from a form. In Flutter, we do it on the button click, but this is on the form submit, but it's very similar concepts. But anyway, let's write this function out. Firstly, let's set that notice. So that is I'm going to set that right here. So this notice message is what we're going to display again in that message field if the user is logged in successfully. If there's an error with Firebase, it will give us that error back, and we'll set the notice message to that instead. So now we're actually going to make our call to Firebase, and we're going to use await. So again, this is async await, very similar to Dart. And we're going to call auth, which is that auth variable that we pulled in here. And then we can do create user with email and password. This is a function of auth that is already part of the Firebase package that we installed. Then we can just pass that email address, which is the email that we're getting passed in from the form. And then we're going to need a password here. So for this example right now, I'm going to just use password, and then we're going to update that. Right after this, we're going to catch the errors. So if the user is not created successfully, which this could happen for a number of reasons, one being the email is badly formatted, another being that the user already exists, so on and so on. But Firebase is going to be able to handle all that for us, which is really nice. But we can catch that error and display it to the user. So catch here, and then we're going to call a function of error. So error here, this error variable is going to be what is returned from the function. So this catch block here is only going to get called if there's an error with this function here. So this isn't going to get called if the call is successful. If the call is not successful, then we're going to be within this block right here. So then we're going to be within this function, which essentially means we have an error. And this error here is basically just a parameter. You could call that whatever you want. The thing we want to do now is we'll know that something went wrong at this point. So if it did, we're going to overwrite this notice message here, and we're going to set it equal to the error dot message. That will basically then display that message to the user, whatever the error was. Okay, you'll see we do have a slight syntax error here. Okay, I spelt method wrong. And it's going to be methods with an S and then a colon here. And this is not going to be there. So it is a little different than data. So this is how that should look. And now that's saving there. So this should be working right now. So as an example, you'll see if I'll sort these by created. Again, these are all test accounts. I'm going to go with the email dave@test1.com, and if I hit join waitlist, okay, so it is not quite working. So let's hit inspect here, and you'll see we have some errors down the side here. If we click on the console tab, we'll see the errors more specifically. We're still kind of getting an error with the way that is called, so I'm thinking we might need to just refresh. And then I'll try that email again. So you'll see post to that. All right, so let's debug this a little bit. if we comment all this out and we console, if you type log, it'll do console.log, and we'll say we are in the function, and then let's also log out the email. So let's refresh this. We'll try that same email address again. So we do have both the variables, so that's good. I'm thinking possibly there's a typo then somewhere in here. Let's go ahead and log in here as well. And try one more time. All right, so we're getting an error calling the function for sign up new user. All right, so actually this post does seem to be working, and we're getting into that error block. So the reason that this is looking like an error, if you actually click into it and click into this here, you can see some more details about it. The error message here is that the email exists. So that is good, because that means that the user was created, which it was. So there actually isn't any problems here. The only problem is that our message isn't displaying down here, which is why I initially thought there was an error. But it really isn't actually an error. And as you can see, this is good though to know that you could console log stuff out here. I think that's useful. That's useful for debugging yourself. So let's remove those logs, but you'll notice this notice message here that we're setting equal to that is not actually, we're not actually setting it equal to this message variable. So pretty much after this whole call is made, which would be after this line, we're going to set this dot message equal to the notice message, and that should get the message displaying. And then we're also going to set the email equal to an empty string. So we're basically going to clear out that email form again. So now if we go back and if we enter that same email address and hit join waiting list, you'll see now it just said it has that error there, which is what this is erroring on, is basically saying the email address is already in use by another account. Now, and you'll notice, see if there's no email there and you just hit join, you'll get that error that it's a badly formatted email. I don't think when someone clicks, enters their same email and hits join, that it should say that it's already in use. I think it should still say that your account has been reserved. So it's kind of like, it's been reserved. If you try and reserve it again, it doesn't matter. It's already been reserved. But the way we can do that is actually by excluding that error from our notice message here. So we can exclude this with a simple if statement, which is going to be if the error code, and you could find these in the Firebase documentation, but if the error code equals auth email already in use, then we're going to okay, so this is basically, since we're using a not equals here, we're saying as long as this error code is not the error for an email already being in use, then we're going to show the error message. If not, then notice message is not going to get overwritten, so it's going to give us this notice message. So if you save this again and type in that same one that already exists and hit join, you'll see it does say your account has been reserved. And if you do a new email too, with another one or something, in join waitlist, it will say that the email has been, or that your account has been reserved. And if you go back over here and refresh this, you'll see we should have those two new users. If you sort by created, you'll see we do have these two new users from our sign up page here. Some part of this that is very insecure is just setting the default password as password. Instead of doing that, we can actually set it to a random string of password. This isn't really a high vulnerability at this moment, but it's not a good practice to ever do this. So, because really the way that these accounts are going to work is someone's going to create this account, then we have their account in Firebase, right? And then when the app actually goes live, we're going to email all these people, and we're going to send them a link to the app and tell them that they can go reset their password, and then they'll have their account. So that's going to be kind of their first experience in the app, is resetting their password in the app. And it's not great to have everyone's password be password to begin with. So to begin with, it'll just be like a random generated password, which doesn't actually matter because we're never going to log into their account and we don't need to know what that random password is. So So that's kind of the point of doing a random one. After this function, we're going to need a comma, and then we can create a new function down here, and we'll call it random password. And this will take a parameter of length. Let's first set a variable called characters or chars, and we're going to set this equal to all the potential characters that we want in the password. So I will copy this over. This is just all the letters in the alphabet, all these symbols, and then all the uppercase letters and all the numbers. We can set the variable password equal to an empty string. Now we can create a little for loop, and we're going to run through the length of this. So we can use x, I guess, for x starting at 0. So that'll be the beginning of our index. This is just basic writing of a for loop in JavaScript. We're going to go through the length that's passed in there, and then we're going to increase by 1. So all this is saying is if we pass in 10 here, we're just going to loop through 10 times. Let's go ahead and log out the x variable here. And let's also log out a math.random, just so we can see what that looks like. So we're going to actually need to call random password here. So let's just do it on this add email. For now, let's comment out all of that and just call this function. For the length, let's actually pass in a length. We need to actually use this on it because we are calling random password, which is a function within this Vue component. So we're calling it on this component, this meaning this component. So this component's function of random password. Because this is an async function, await this, cool. So now you'll see we get 0 through 9 because we entered 10, and then our math.random is giving us this random string, or this random number here. So we want this number to actually be, we want to be able to get a random digit of this string. So to get a random variable of this string, what we can do is we can get a random number that is within the length of this, and then we can use that random number to get the index of the string, the index of the value of the string at that number. So for instance, if we were able to get the number 3, which would be the 4, it would be 0, 1, 2, 3, we could get the letter D out of it. So it's a little confusing. Let me write it out, and then when it's printed, I think you'll see. So firstly, we're going to call on this, we're going to wrap it in a math.floor. So that's going to convert this to a integer, because if you remember before, it was not an integer. And we're going to multiply this by the length of the characters here. So it'll be chars.length. And if we log this out now, it'll just be a number. It should just be like a whole number. There, that looks good. We can remove the x value from being printed, but you can see if we do this one more time, it's just going to be printing us a random number between 1 and the length of that character, which this is probably like 60 characters. So you'll notice it's like between roughly 1 and 60. So now we can use that to actually get the character in this string at that index. So let's log out this as well, and we'll just say chars.char at, and then we're going to say the character at this. So instead of logging this anymore, we're going to set this to a variable. So we can call this this is really the index, so we can call it the I. And then don't forget to remove that from the print statement. So then we can say the character at I. And now when we print it, it should be some random character of there. So refresh that, hit the button. Yeah, and you can see we're getting just random characters. If we increase this to 20 and do the same thing, you'll see we just get a random 20 characters. So instead of logging this out, we're going to actually append it to this variable. So we're going to say that this variable plus equals the character there, and don't forget to remove that. And then after this for loop, for now, let's just so we can see it, let's log the password. And now if we refresh this and hit join, you'll see we're always getting just a random 20 character password. So that's perfect. Instead of logging this, we're going to actually return it. And then up here we can uncomment all of this stuff, because again, we were just doing this for testing. But we can take this call to the password here, and instead of setting the password to just password, we can set it to a random 20 character string. So yeah, this should work exactly the same. If I do another one with, to hit join waiting list, that will be there. I mean, the way that you could test this is if you have your Flutter app already set up, you can go and log in with this user's account, or you could go log in with this user's account, and you'll see that you'll know their password was password because that was what it was set to. This one, you're not going to know their password because it's just a random string. If you were to print out that string as well, instead of just returning this, you could print it and return it, and then you would know the password and you could test that. But the whole point of this is just to set up these accounts with a random password so that no one's ever going to be able to log into it without resetting the password. So that's what this will accomplish, and it is now actually complete. So I think at this point, our join waiting list reserve your account feature is now set up. It was actually just one part of the entire series of building a landing page with Firebase and sending emails. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. All right, ciao for now.